Greetings everybody, Brother Goodwin here. This is the God's Final Jubilee program and I'm your host today. This is July the 28th and 2019. Some interesting stories on the news in recent days that I want to take the program today to speak about. First, let me read a verse for you in the book of Mark, chapter 13. In verse 20, and except that the Lord had shortened those days, no flesh should be saved. But for the elect's sake, whom he hath chosen, he hath shortened the days. Now Matthew 13 is a sister chapter to Matthew 24, as most of you know. And it's talking about during the tribulation. It's not talking about the church age. It's talking about during Daniel's 70th week. And I believe he's talking about the second half of the tribulation. Most of Matthew 24 and Mark 13, most of it is dealing with the Great Tribulation, the time of Jacob's trouble. And right at the abomination of desolation, the Antichrist goes in the temple. And you know the whole story there. Most of those chapters deal with that second half of the tribulation, where Israel is under attack, and the peace treaties, the covenant's been broken. And once again, their lives are in peril, in great danger. Okay, so, but I use that passage in my book. I have a book called The 7 Clocks a Ticking, as many of you have the book. 7 clocks a ticking towards Christ's soon return. And there's a chapter in this book called The Ticking Nuclear Clock. And I use that verse right at the beginning of my discourse here in the chapter. I use Mark 13 verse 20. War broke out. Let me just read a few excerpts from the chapter. War broke out on the earth as soon as Adam took the first bite of the forbidden fruit. Isn't that true? War broke out on the earth. War had already broke out in heaven with Satan. Now remember, there's no time outside of our universe. You can't put one of the mistakes that prophecy people do is they try to put a time. Was that before, during, or after? The answer is yes. What do you mean? The answer is yeah. There is no before, during, or after. There is no time. No, you're never going to wrap your brain around that. You're never going to fully grasp that. In my Mystery of the Jubilee book, I have a chapter called The Mystery of Time. Every Christian ought to read that chapter. So, in other words, Satan went to war against God, wanted to extend his throne into the heavens to be like God. Now, he didn't want to overthrow God, he wanted to be like God. And that happened outside of time. Now, that's important to understand. There's not a pre, during, or after the earth. That's outside of time. Okay? War broke out on the earth as soon as Adam, inside of time and space, took a bite out of that forbidden fruit, and war broke out on the earth right there. The first deadly weapon was a simple rock in the hand of Cain as he took the life, a rock or a stick, who knows, as he took the life of his own brother right there in the midst of a place called paradise. So, remember, now, of course, I guess they've already been kicked out of the garden by now, but they're still, this is in the early days of creation, right? Ever since then, weapons of war have increased in number, in violence, and in effect. The final war upon the earth is going to be cataclysmic. It is described in the scriptures as so horrible that if God doesn't intervene, the entire world would perish. I use that as my premise. And then I get into Mark chapter 13. It is very plain in Scripture that the final generation upon the earth, before the Lord returns, will have the ability to destroy all of mankind. Now we're talking about right around the middle of the tribulation and beyond. So that could be as much as 3.5 years from now, right? At least that anyway. I believe that day is here and that it is only by the grace of God that we have not already destroyed ourselves. For this reason, I believe the nuclear clock is a ticking clock, and that it is only mere minutes from midnight. Wars and rumors of wars, Matthew calls it, Matthew 24. A study of history is a study of war. We began with a war against God in the Garden of Eden, and we will end with a final war against Christ at Armageddon. You will have a hard time looking back in history to find a time of world peace. It seems like war is in our nature, and we simply must have it. And the old famous Prussian proverb says, in case of rain, the war would be held in the auditorium. In other words, rain or shine, good times or bad times, we will have our war. Okay, so realize that today. As a Christian, as a Bible believer, understand that we will have war. Wars will come and wars will go. Get over it. It's already been foretold that that's going to happen. Historical artifacts, art, and civilizations are dated by wars. For instance, there are pre-war era Martin guitars. I'm a guitar fanatic. I buy and sell guitars on the side. And a pre-war Martin is a Martin made before 1941, before the war. We date things that way. Furniture is dated that way. We've got Revolutionary era furniture. We've got Civil War era banjos, right? Jesus spoke of wars and rumors of wars as if to confirm that every generation and people would be affected by war. The final generation, for the first time ever in our generation, the world has the capability to destroy itself. I believe that. I believe right now the world could destroy itself 10 times over. Now, the fact that nobody has nuked anybody except what we did in 1945 to Japan, since then nobody has nuked anybody. That's a miracle of God, and that's for another day. But I believe there's a line in the sand that God will not allow man to cross, and I believe now there could be some nuclear explosions anytime now, but we're not going to destroy ourselves. We know that because we've read the last chapter. We know what's coming. In the chapter, I give a history of war. I give the history. For 5,000 years of human history, not a lot changed concerning warfare. Swords, spears, bows, clubs were the weaponry to choose from. It is approximately 1000 AD when gunpowder was invented and first used in warfare. This would begin to change how man would practice war. Portable cannons were invented 1450 AD. The flintlock rifle, early 1600s. See how for 5,600 years it was basically hand-to-hand, swords, knives, clubs, rocks, until somewhere around 1500, 1600, after gunpowder's invented. Now we're going to start using explosives. We're going to start exploding something in a barrel, shooting a rock, or what we would call a bullet today, across to where you didn't have to be right next to your opponent. You could shoot him from a distance. And boy, have we perfected that. We can kill people thousands of miles away now. We fly drones now to kill people. So, after 5,900 years of human history, warfare had evolved from primitive swords and spears to firing projectiles from airplanes and submersible boats. And I'm skimming here. I've skipped some for you, but the world had seen nothing yet, however. Man was just getting started in his quest to wage war and annihilate cities and kingdoms. The nuclear age. And there's a whole section in here about the Manhattan Project. If you have not read this, you really need to get the book and read this chapter. I have a whole thing on the Manhattan Project. It's unbelievable. Did you know there was Russian collusion there? Did you know way back then, 1944, did you know there was a Russian spy inside of the Manhattan Project? Did you know that even the Vice President, Mr. Truman, did not know what the Manhattan Project was, or that we were developing a nuclear bomb, until FDR died and they swore him in, and then they pulled him aside and let the president know, the new president, President Truman, hey, we've got an atom bomb, and we need your permission. We need to drop it on Japan. I mean, that's what they built it for. So. By the way, the hydrogen bomb came out in 1952, just 7 years after the atom bomb, and 1,000 times more powerful than the bomb dropped on Japan. You think about that. 1952, we developed a weapon that was 1,000 times more destructive than the atom bomb dropped on Hiroshima. Let that sink into your head a minute. Then let me go a little further and really shock you. That was over 70 years ago, or almost 70 years ago. What do you suppose we've got today? You can't even imagine. Well, that brings us to the topic of our discussion today. There's two articles that I want to share with you. One I'm going to read for you here. This was dated July 26th, so just 2 days ago. This article come out, and I've heard this story before, similar stories to this. Here's the headline. Snake-like UFO seen across the United States could be military craft used by Space Force. Remember the Space Force? Everybody laughed at Donald Trump. He began what we call the Space Force. He put his seal of approval. He started it. And so some are saying that this phenomenon that people are seeing in the sky, and this just happened, by the way. Now, they've seen it more than once, but this story just happened where people actually videoed this snake-like thing in the sky, and they couldn't hear anything. There was no sound. It moved very rapidly. They were trying to figure out what it was. But they've been seen before, because I've read some of these stories in prior weeks and months. I've read some of these stories. The first sighting of the mysterious object happened last month when the YouTuber named Cody Kennedy was stunned to discover a flashing light hovering over the Mojave Desert in California. 2 weeks later, renowned conspiracy theorist Blake Cousins uploaded footage to his YouTube channel of a similar craft in the skies over Colorado. So another time it was seen. The object seemed to plunge to the ground before darting off at a right angle, elongating its shape like a snake in the process. And then, just over a month after the first video, they saw one over Washington. The YouTube star, who has been researching blah 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 blah, has now revealed exclusively to the Daily Star Online that he thinks they could be part of the Space Force. Now, of course, a lot of your prophecy people out there, even some of the mainstream prophecy people that you watch, they jump on this and they jump to the conclusion that these are demons and these are fallen angels and all. I do not believe that for a minute. Have never believed that. And I'm going to be doing a show about that in the near future, but we'll just leave it there for now. No, I have said for years that these UFO sightings, many of them are just strange phenomena, lights, reflections, and it's just that. A UFO is an unidentified flying object, nothing more. Yeah, we seem to jump to the conclusion that means it's some green men from Mars or something. No. These sightings happen. They've happened for many years, and many of them are military operations in our country or other countries. You've heard of Area 51. That's been in the news lately as well. Supposedly 1 million people say they're going to converge on Area 51. So a lot of the military testing ground happens right out there. By the way, that's where the Manhattan Project, they exploded the first nuclear bomb, not necessarily in Area 51, but I mean out in these secluded areas. New Mexico, I think it was New Mexico, where they exploded the first atom bomb and tested it. And they were shocked at what happened. So the Area 51, I believe, is a place where they build and test secret military weapons of war. That leads me to the next story. This is out. What's the date on this? This is today. This story came out today. I posted it today on Facebook. U.S. Navy and Lockheed Martin officially introduced directed energy weapons into warfare. I was going to put a picture of it up there, but I'm not going to bother trying to do that. It's on my website, on my Facebook page. You can find this. So if you're watching this YouTube, just go to my Facebook page. I'll tell you what, I'll try to remember to put a link down below here for you where you can go to my Facebook page and see a picture of this. Nearly 4 years ago, I wrote an article entitled Lasers and Electronic Warfare to be Used in New World of Drones and Anti-Drones, wherein I detailed the trend toward using directed energy weapons. Unfortunately, it appears that much of the speculation at that time about whether or not this was merely a military-industrial complex looking to fund more projects that would never see the light of day actually has become reality. And if swarms of enemy small attack boats armed with guns and explosives approached a Navy ship alongside missile-armed drones and helicopters closing into strike range, ship commanders would instantly begin weighing defensive options to include interceptor missiles, electronic warfare, deck-mounted guns, or area weapons such as close-in weapon systems. Now attacks such as these will also be countered with laser weapons. That's what we're talking about here. This is right out of Star Trek and Star Wars. Of course, Star Trek was way ahead of Star Wars, way back in the late 60s, Star Trek. And they called them phasers. There was a laser beam. That's what this is. It is here now, and it's probably already been in operation. And here they are, and they're talking about putting these on satellites out in space where they can shoot an aircraft down, intercept a nuclear missile. By the way, speed of light, these things. I mean, talk about fast. No missile is going to outrun this laser beam. So this is what we have today. This is what's going on. And these are not demonic beings like some of the prophecy people are saying. These are man-made operatives. These are man-made machinery and weapons that are going to be used by our government and other governments. I read a story that China may also have these. Of course, they have supposedly stolen a lot of our technical secrets, and so it's fast becoming a space war right out of Hollywood's Star Wars or something. We're fast. We're on a fast track, moving that way at light speed. Pun intended there. All that to say this, folks. We're at the end of this thing. We are at the end of this thing. The Lord is getting ready to come back. The trumpet is getting ready to sound. We are at the verge of World War III. And we're on the verge of destroying each other, worldwide destruction. And I heard a guy today on a video that I watched. He said that the Muslims were being funded and arms supplied to them by Russia, communist Russia. And that if a nuclear bomb explodes in this country, it will be blamed on Muslim terrorists. But that it would actually be Russia behind the scenes that funded them, gave them the weapon, and pushed them to do it, so that they get blamed for it and Russia stands back and just watches. Now, isn't that frightening to think about? And so these are perilous times. The Bible says in the last days be perilous times, dangerous times. Isn't that right? If you don't think we're in dangerous times now, you don't understand what's happening. You realize an EMP, a nuclear explosion in the atmosphere, that may or may not even be seen or heard by anybody, would kill the electric grid in our country. And there's differences of opinions on how serious it would be and what would be shut down, what wouldn't. But many experts believe it would shut down all electronics. No cell phones. Your car would not start. All the lights would go out. Everything. All the electric grid would go out. Anything with modern circuitry would not work. It'd have to be like they say the 70s and early 80s automobiles before the electronic ignition. There's some differences of opinion, but some say that those might still run. Who knows? Do you understand what that would do to our country? How would you get food? How would you get water? How would you get medical attention? How would you get to the hospital? What would happen if you got to the hospital? There's no power at the hospital. You say, well, they've got generators. The generator's dead too. Now you think about this. We're living in perilous, dangerous times. We're right on the edge of something here. Now, am I trying to scare you? No, I'm trying to get you to look up, because your redemption draweth nigh. The Lord's coming back soon. Now, we may go through some bad stuff before the rapture, and you ought to be ready. Friend, you ought to have some supplies in your house. Look, you ought to do that anyway. There could be a hurricane or a tornado, and you could be stranded for a week. You ought to have some supplies. You ought to have some water, some food that don't have to be refrigerated, and you need to be prepared. Have batteries and flashlights and candles and matches and a kerosene lamp. You name it. You ought to be. We have been programmed over the last 20 or 30 years. We have been programmed to depend on technology and the government and other people to sustain our life. Do you understand what happens when all that goes away and people don't have any means of taking care of themselves? That's right, you die. And there's going to be wars on the streets, especially in the big cities. That's where it'll start. There'll be wars, there'll be warfare on the streets of Chicago, New York City, Los Angeles, you name it. And now us folks out in the country will have a little better chance at things. And so I'm just wanted to share a couple of these news stories with you that I found interesting, and you can check them out for yourself. These laser beams, high energy beams, it's real, and these things, these UFO sightings, they're not people from Mars, and they're not demons, they're not devils, they're not fallen angels. A bunch of nonsense. They're either somebody's. It's either a light reflection or something just can't be explained, or it's most likely something to do with our military and whatnot, and nobody's gonna claim it. You know, they say, well, the military says it's not theirs. Well, the military said there was no atom bomb too. They kept that secret from the American people. They kept it secret from everybody, even the vice president. Now, I'm not saying that's right. I'm just saying that's the way governments are. There are secret things going on that they will not allow you to know about. We're starting to find out about that, aren't we, with the Mueller investigation and all the corruption in the FBI and all these rats and people in Congress and all these people that have lied and that have spied on the opponents and political opponents. What Mr. Nixon did was a drop in a bucket compared to what the Democrat Party today has done. And it's all coming out. Little by little, it's all coming out. These are perilous times we live in. Now, Trump's the big unknown here. God put Trump in office, shook the whole place up. We don't know what's coming. So, anyway, I'm Brother Goodwin, your host on the God's Final Jubilee program. You can find us at godsfinaljubilee.com. Go to the website. And if you have not got the book, The 7 Clocks a Ticking, I highly recommend you get this book. What I was reading was the nuclear clock chapter inside this book. Very, very, very scary chapter. But there's a lot of interesting things in that book. There are 7 clocks ticking towards the soon return of Jesus Christ. And they're all pointing towards, 2 minutes to midnight. Time is short. We're getting out of here soon. And I hope you're ready to meet him. Hope you know Jesus Christ as your Savior. Because if you don't, my friend, you will be left behind. If you need any help with that, feel free to contact me. Go to the website. You can get my email there, daniel@godsfinaljubilee.com. You can contact me. Be glad to help you understand salvation and what it means to be saved. And because the Bible says you must be born again. Jesus said that. And nobody will go to heaven that is not born again. I don't care how good you live your life. I don't care how many churches you become a member of. If you're not born again, you will not be going to heaven. And all right. Glad to have you stop by with us today. And check out the website. And we'll see you next time.